The autumn rain pelted against the floor-to-ceiling windows of Marcus Chin's corner office in downtown Seattle, creating rivulets that distorted the city lights below. At 28, Marcus had achieved what most tech professionals only dreamed: OVA senior software architect position at Nexus Technologies, one of the Pacific Northwest's most prestigious firms. Yet, as he stared at his phone screen, refreshing his messages for the dozenth time that evening, he felt more isolated than ever. Still here, Marcus. Sarah Martinez, the head of HR, poked her head through his door. It's past 8. Marcus quickly locked his phone and forced a smile. Just finishing up the API documentation for the Reynolds project. Sarah's expression softened with something that looked dangerously close to pity. You know, a bunch of us are heading to the Brass Monkey, you should come. The invitation hung in the air between them. Marcus knew she meant well, but he also knew the truth: if they'd wanted him there, he would have known about it hours ago, through the same channels everyone else did. Thanks, but I've got an early morning tomorrow, he lied smoothly. After Sarah left, Marcus unlocked his phone again. His WhatsApp showed the same empty screen, save for a message from his mother asking about Thanksgiving plans and a notification from his dentist. But he knew his colleagues were chatting somewhere. He'd overheard enough conversations by the coffee machine, caught enough glimpses of phones being quickly tucked away when he approached. The revelation had come 3 weeks ago, completely by accident. During a team meeting, Jake Morrison's phone had buzzed on the conference table. Screen up. Marcus had glimpsed the notification. Dev Team Social with 47 unread messages. When Marcus checked his own WhatsApp later, searching for any group with a similar name, he found nothing. At first, he'd rationalized it. Maybe it was just a small group. Maybe they'd forgotten to add him. But as days passed, the evidence mounted. Inside jokes he didn't understand. References to conversations he'd never been part of. Plans that materialized, fully formed, while he remained perpetually out of the loop. The Seattle tech scene was notorious for its passive-aggressive social dynamics, but this felt different. This was deliberate exclusion, wrapped in Pacific Northwest politeness. Marcus grabbed his rain jacket and headed for the elevator. The office was mostly empty now, just a few dedicated souls hunched over their keyboards, bathed in the blue glow of multiple monitors. As he waited for the elevator, he could hear laughter echoing from somewhere down the hall, probably from the marketing department. Another group that seemed to operate in a parallel social universe he couldn't access. The rain had intensified. By the time he reached street level, Seattle's infamous drizzle had transformed into a proper downpour, and Marcus pulled his hood up as he jogged to his Tesla Model 3. The car recognized him immediately, doors unlocking with a soft chirp. Inside the climate-controlled cocoon of his vehicle, Marcus finally allowed himself to feel the full weight of his isolation. He'd moved to Seattle 5 years ago, leaving behind college friends and family in San Francisco, drawn by the promise of innovation and opportunity. He'd thrown himself into his work, excelling at every project, earning promotions and accolades. But somewhere along the way, he'd failed at something apparently more important: fitting in. His phone buzzed. For a moment, his heart leaped. Maybe someone had finally remembered to include him. But it was just a LinkedIn notification. Someone had viewed his profile. As he navigated through the rain-slicked streets toward his Capitol Hill apartment, Marcus's mind wandered to a conversation he'd overheard between 2 junior developers earlier that week. "Did you see what Emma posted in the chat last night?" One had giggled. "Oh my god, yes. The meme about Brad's code review comments." I nearly choked on my coffee. They'd noticed Marcus approaching and quickly shifted to discussing sprint planning, but the damage was done. There was clearly a whole parallel social ecosystem happening on their phones, and he wasn't part of it. His apartment building's underground parking garage provided welcome relief from the rain. Marcus parked and took the elevator up to his 12th floor unit, a modern one-bedroom with spectacular views of the Sound on clear days. Tonight, though, all he could see were the lights of other buildings, other lives happening behind illuminated windows. He kicked off his shoes and padded to the kitchen, where he poured himself a glass of the expensive Pinot Noir he'd been saving for a special occasion. This wasn't exactly what he'd had in mind, but somehow it felt appropriate. Settling onto his couch, Marcus opened his laptop and did what he always did when faced with a problem: he researched. He pulled up WhatsApp web, even though he knew it would show the same empty landscape as his phone. Then he opened LinkedIn, scrolling through his connections at Nexus. There was Jake Morrison, the team lead who'd inadvertently revealed the group chat; Emma Walsh, the senior developer, whose memes were apparently legendary. Brad Kowalski, whose code reviews were fodder for inside jokes he'd never see. They all seemed so connected, their profiles full of mutual endorsements and shared experiences. Meanwhile, his own profile, while impressive in terms of technical achievements, felt sterile in comparison. A notification popped up on his screen. Someone had posted in the Nexus Technologies LinkedIn page photos from an escape room event last weekend. Marcus clicked through them, his heart sinking with each image. There was his entire team, laughing, celebrating, holding up a mission accomplished banner. The timestamp showed Saturday at 3 p.m. He'd been home, working on a side project, completely unaware. The caption read, "Amazing team building day with the Nexus Dev Squad. Nothing brings people together like solving puzzles and escaping zombies. Hashtag teamwork, hashtag Nexus culture, 47 likes. 18 comments, all from people he worked with every day." Marcus closed the laptop and took a long sip of wine. The rain continued its assault on his windows, and somewhere in the distance, a siren wailed through the night. He thought about his code, always clean, always efficient, always solving the problem at hand. But apparently, he'd failed to debug the most important algorithm of all: human connection. His phone buzzed again. This time it was his college roommate, David, sending a photo from his wedding rehearsal dinner in Napa. "Wish you could have made it, buddy. The old crew misses you." The old crew. Another group chat he'd gradually faded from, too busy with work to maintain those connections. Marcus realized he'd become an expert at excluding himself long before others had started doing it for him. He stood and walked to his window, looking out at the city below. Seattle stretched out in all directions, a maze of lights and lives, and connections he couldn't seem to navigate. Somewhere out there, his colleagues were probably on their second round at the Brass Monkey, sharing stories and building bonds that would manifest as inside jokes on Monday morning. The WhatsApp webpage still glowed on his laptop screen, taunting him with its emptiness. Marcus stared at it, and an idea began to form, wild, impractical, but undeniably tempting. What if the problem wasn't him? What if the problem was the platform itself? He'd built his career on solving technical problems. He'd optimized databases, streamlined user interfaces, and architected systems that handled millions of requests per second. But he'd never considered applying those same problem-solving skills to his social life. Marcus opened a new browser tab and began searching. WhatsApp's parent company, Meta. Market valuations. Competitor analyses. The messaging app landscape was dominated by a few major players, but there were always startups trying to carve out their niche. His fingers flew across the keyboard as he dove deeper into his research. Messaging platforms were about network effects. People used them because everyone else used them. It was a classic chicken and egg problem. But what if someone could break that cycle? What if someone with enough resources, enough determination, could create an alternative? The wine bottle sat forgotten as Marcus lost himself in financial reports and technical specifications. The rain had lessened to a gentle patter, and the city lights blurred as his eyes focused on screen after screen of data. By 2 a.m. he had filled 3 notebooks with calculations and sketches. It was insane. It was impossible. It was exactly the kind of challenge that had driven him to success in every other area of his life. Marcus finally closed his laptop and prepared for bed, but his mind continued racing. He'd been excluded from the group chat, shut out of the social circle that seemed to define workplace culture at Nexus. But what if, instead of finding a way in, he could make the entire system irrelevant? As he lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, Marcus made a decision. He wouldn't beg for inclusion. He wouldn't try to ingratiate himself with colleagues who'd made their choice clear. Instead, he would do what he did best: build something better. The last thing he did before falling asleep was send a single email to his financial advisor. "Schedule a meeting for Monday morning. I need to discuss liquidating some assets. I have a new project in mind." Outside, Seattle slept under a blanket of clouds, unaware that in a Capitol Hill apartment, a plan was forming that would challenge the very foundations of how people connected in the digital age. Marcus Chen had been left out of the group chat. Soon, he would make sure nobody else ever felt that way again by making the group chat itself obsolete. The city lights twinkled below, each one representing a life, a story, a potential connection. And for the first time in weeks, Marcus smiled as he drifted off to sleep, his dreams filled not with the loneliness of exclusion, but with the endless possibilities of creation. End of chapter 1. tentar novamente conquistar Chapter 2. De Plano Marcos arrived at the offices of Steinberg Financial Management at 7 a.m. sharp on Monday morning. A full hour before his scheduled meeting, the Seattle financial district was already buzzing with activity, coffee-clutching professionals streaming in and out of the various towers that scraped the perpetually gray sky. He sat in the minimalist waiting area, reviewing the proposal he'd spent the entire weekend preparing. 63 pages of market analysis, technical specifications, and financial projections. It was perhaps the most ambitious document he'd ever created, and certainly the most personal. "Marcus, good to see you." Richard Steinberg emerged from his office, hand extended. The veteran financial advisor had been managing Marcus's portfolio since his first stock options vested at Nexus. "I have to admit, your email intrigued me. It's not often clients want to discuss liquidation at your age." They settled into Richard's corner office, with its panoramic views of Elliott Bay. The morning fog was just beginning to lift, revealing the ghostly outlines of the Olympic Mountains in the distance. "So," Richard said, settling behind his mahogany desk, "what's this project that has you ready to cash out?" Marcus slid the bound proposal across the desk. "I want to acquire and transform a messaging platform." Richard's eyebrows rose as he flipped through the first few pages. "This is comprehensive. May I ask what prompted this particular venture?" For a moment, Marcus considered spinning a story about market opportunities and technological innovation. Instead, he found himself telling the truth. "I discovered I've been systematically excluded from my workplace's social communications, not just one group chat, an entire parallel social infrastructure that I'm not part of." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "At first, I was hurt. Then I was angry. But then I realized something. If it's happening to me, it's happening to thousands of others." Richard leaned back in his chair, studying Marcus with newfound interest. "So this is personal." "Everything important is personal," Marcus replied. "Look at page 23. I've identified 17 messaging startups that have strong technical foundations but are struggling with user adoption. Most could be acquired for under $50 million. And you have." Richard glanced at his computer screen. "Approximately $42 million in liquid assets once we factor in your stock options, real estate equity, and various investments." "I'll need additional funding," Marcus acknowledged. "But I've already had preliminary conversations with 3 venture capital firms. My track record at Nexus opens doors." Richard spent the next 30 minutes reviewing the proposal in detail, occasionally asking pointed questions about burn rates, user acquisition costs, and technical scalability. Marcus had answers for everything. "The messaging app market is dominated by established players," Richard finally said. "WhatsApp, Telegram, Signal, they have billions of users between them. What makes you think you can compete?" Marcus pulled out his phone and opened WhatsApp. Every one of these platforms has the same fundamental flaw: they're built on exclusion. Private groups, hidden conversations, invite-only channels. They mirror and amplify the worst aspects of human social dynamics. He leaned forward, his passion evident. "What if we built something different? A platform that actively works to create connections rather than walls. That identifies when someone is being left out and suggests inclusions. That makes it harder to exclude than to include." "That's a beautiful philosophy," Richard said carefully. "But how does it translate to user adoption? People are creatures of habit. They use what their friends use. Which is why we don't compete on features alone," Marcus explained, flipping to another section of his proposal. "We acquire a platform that already has a user base. As a small one, we integrate with existing platforms during a transition period, and we target specific communities where inclusion is already a core value." He pulled up a slide on his tablet. "Corporate diversity and inclusion departments, educational institutions with anti-bullying initiatives, mental health organizations. We build from communities that already understand the problem we're solving." Richard was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the bay where a Washington State ferry was making its morning crossing. Finally, he turned back to Marcus. "You're asking me to help you liquidate nearly everything you've built over the past 5 years, your safety net, your retirement fund, your future security, all for a platform that might never achieve critical mass." "Yes," Marcus said simply. "And you understand that even if you acquire one of these struggling startups, you'll be competing against companies with essentially unlimited resources." "Yes," Richard smiled. "Good, I wanted to make sure you understood the risks. Now let's talk about how we make this happen." The next 3 hours were a whirlwind of financial strategizing. Richard brought in 2 associates, and together they mapped out a liquidation strategy that would maximize Marcus's available capital while minimizing tax implications. They discussed bridge funding, venture capital approaches, and potential acquisition targets. By the time Marcus left the building, his head was spinning with numbers and timelines, but his resolve had only strengthened. He had one more stop before returning to Nexus for what would likely be one of his last days there. The offices of Cascade Ventures occupied 2 floors of a converted warehouse in the South Lake Union District, the heart of Seattle's tech boom. Marcus had chosen them specifically because of their track record with social platforms and their founding partners' own history of being an outsider in tech. Priya Patel had built her first company while working night shifts as a security guard, unable to afford the networking events and coding boot camps that seemed to be prerequisites for success in Silicon Valley. Now, 15 years later, she was one of the most respected VCs in the Pacific Northwest. Marcus Chen, she greeted him in the firm's open concept reception area. "I've been following your work on the Reynolds Project. Elegant solution to the synchronization problem." They settled into a conference room with walls covered in whiteboards bearing the remnants of countless pitch sessions. "So," Priya said, cutting straight to the point, "Richard Steinberg called me this morning. Said you have a proposal that's either brilliant or insane, and he can't decide which." Marcus laughed. "Maybe both." He launched into his pitch, but this time with a different focus. Where Richard had needed to see financial viability, Priya needed to see vision and scalability. He talked about the loneliness epidemic, the rise of workplace isolation, despite or perhaps because of our hyperconnected world. He showed her statistics on mental health impacts of social exclusion, productivity losses in companies with poor internal communication cultures. The average knowledge worker checks their phone 96 times per day, Marcus explained. Half of those checks are for messaging apps, and each time they open WhatsApp or Slack and see conversations happening without them, it reinforces their isolation. "We can build something better," Priya interrupted him 40 minutes into the presentation. "I've heard enough about the problem. Show me your solution." Marcus pulled up his technical specifications. "We start with Connect Hub, the startup that launched last year. They have, 100,000 users. 150,000, mostly in Southeast Asia. Their tech stack is solid end-to-end encryption, excellent group management tools, clean UI, but they're burning through cash and their user growth has stalled because they're trying to be another WhatsApp clone," Priya observed. "Exactly, but their infrastructure is perfect for what I have in mind." Marcus opened his laptop and showed her mock-ups he'd created over the weekend. "We pivot completely. Instead of private group chats, we create smart community spaces, AI-powered inclusion, prompts, sentiment analysis that identifies when someone is being left out of conversations, gentle nudges to include quiet members." "You're talking about fundamental behavior change," Priya said. "That's the hardest thing to achieve in tech. But not impossible. Look at how LinkedIn changed professional networking, how Uber changed transportation habits. The key is making the inclusive behavior easier than the exclusive behavior." Priya stood and walked to the window, looking out at the construction cranes that seemed to perpetually dot Seattle's skyline. "How much are you putting in personally?" "Everything. $42 million after liquidation." She turned back to him, surprised. "Everything? This isn't just a business venture for me," Marcus admitted. "It's a chance to solve a problem I've lived with my entire life. Even if we fail, I have to try." Priya was quiet for a long moment. Then she walked to one of the whiteboards and began sketching out deal terms. "Cascade will put in $30 million for a 40% stake, contingent on successful acquisition of Connect Hub. You'll need another strategic partner for marketing and user acquisition. I'm thinking Emergence Capital. They have a good track record with community platforms." Marcus stared at the numbers taking shape on the whiteboard. It was happening. It was actually happening. "There are conditions," Priya continued. "You'll need to bring on a CEO with consumer platform experience. You can be CTO and maintain creative control over the product vision. But scaling this will require someone who's done it before." "Agreed. And we'll want to see a working prototype of your inclusion features within 90 days of acquisition. Proof of concept before we fund the full pivot." "I can do it in 60. Priya smiled. "I believe you can. One more thing, you'll need to leave Nexus immediately. This is going to require your full attention, and we can't have any IP complications." Marcus thought about the half-finished projects on his desk, the team that had excluded him from their social circle but still depended on his technical expertise. I'll submit my resignation today. They spent another hour working through details: board structure, hiring plans, acquisition timeline. By the time Marcus left Cascade Ventures, the lunch crowd was flooding the streets. Tech workers in their uniform of jeans and company hoodies searching for poke bowls and artisanal coffee. His phone buzzed. A text from Sarah in HR. "Missed you. At the morning stand-up. Everything okay?" Marcus looked at the message for a long moment, then typed back, "Everything's perfect. Can we schedule a meeting this afternoon? I have some news." As he walked back to his car, Marcus's phone buzzed again. This time it was from a number he didn't recognize. "Hi Marcus, this is Tom Leo, CEO of Connect Hub. I just got a very interesting call from Priya Patel. Would love to chat when you have a chance." The pieces were falling into place faster than he'd dared hope. In 3 hours, he'd set in motion a plan that would either revolutionize how people connected online or spectacularly implode his carefully constructed life. But as Marcus drove back toward the Nexus offices, ready to resign from the job that had defined him for the past 5 years, he felt something he hadn't experienced in months. Hope. Not hope that he'd finally be included in the group chat, but hope that he could build a world where such exclusions became relics of a less connected past. The Seattle skyline rose before him, all glass and steel and ambition. Somewhere in one of those towers, his former colleagues were probably discussing weekend plans in their private chat, sharing memes he'd never see, building bonds he'd never be part of. Soon, Marcus thought, that wouldn't matter. Because he wasn't just leaving the group chat behind, he was preparing to make it obsolete. His phone rang. Richard Steinberg. "Marcus, I've got good news. The liquidation can begin immediately. Also, I may have found you a CEO candidate. Remember Diana Walsh from Microsoft? She led their team's consumer pivot before leaving to start her own consultancy. She's interested." The universe, it seemed, was conspiring to help him. Or perhaps it was simply that when you committed fully to solving a real problem, solutions had a way of presenting themselves. Marcus pulled into the Nexus parking garage one last time as an employee. In a few hours, he'd leave as an entrepreneur with a mission. The group chat that had excluded him would continue their conversations. Unaware that their casual cruelty had sparked something much larger, he thought about all the people like him, the ones checking empty message screens, the ones overhearing conversations about plans they weren't part of, the ones building walls around their hearts because the digital walls around others' social circles had proven impenetrable. "We're going to fix this," he said aloud to his empty car. "All of it." Then Marcus Chen, soon to be former senior software architect, future CTO of a platform that didn't yet have a name, walked into Nexus Technologies to resign from his safe, lucrative, lonely position and begin the real work of his life. The revolution wouldn't be televised. It would be messaged, shared, and inclusive. And it would start with a man who'd been left out of the group chat one too many times. End of Chapter 2. Tentar novamente editar Chapter 3. The acquisition. The conference room on the 42nd floor of the Rainier Tower had been nicknamed the closer by Seattle's tech elite. Deals worth billions had been negotiated within its glass walls. On this overcast Thursday morning in early December, Marcus Chen sat at one end of the polished table, trying to project confidence despite the magnitude of what was about to unfold. Across from him, Tom Liu, the 35-year-old CEO of Connect Hub, fidgeted with his coffee cup. The entrepreneur who'd once boldly proclaimed he would dethrone WhatsApp looked exhausted, worn down by 18 months of dwindling user growth and depleting runway. "I appreciate you flying in from Singapore," Marcus began, but Tom waved him off. "When Priya Patel calls and says someone wants to acquire your struggling startup for 20 million cash, you booked the next flight." Tom's smile was rueful. "I just want to understand why. Our user base has been flat for 6 months. We're burning $500,000 monthly. Most VCs won't even take our calls anymore." Diana Walsh, whom Marcus had brought on as CEO designate pending the acquisition, leaned forward. At 43, she had the kind of presence that commanded boardrooms, silver-streaked hair pulled back severely, designer glasses that somehow made her look both intellectual and intimidating. "Your platform has something more valuable than users," Diana said. "You have architecture. Clean, scalable, secure architecture. Plus, Your 150,000 users aren't in the US market, they're in Indonesia, Malaysia, Vietnam, markets where the major players aren't as entrenched. You want to use us as a Trojan horse, Tom said slowly. Build something new on our bones. We want to evolve what you've built, Marcus corrected. Your vision of challenging WhatsApp wasn't wrong. Your approach was. You tried to beat them at their own game instead of changing the rules entirely. Marcus pulled up a presentation on the room's massive display. The first slide showed a heat map of social isolation statistics across major cities. Seattle glowed particularly red. 47% of remote workers report feeling left out of their team's social dynamics. 62% of new employees at tech companies say breaking into established social circles is their biggest challenge. The platforms meant to connect us have become tools of exclusion. Tom studied the data. So you want to what? Force people to include everyone? Not force, Marcus said. Incentivize, guide, make inclusion the path of least resistance. He clicked to the next slide, showing you Imagine opening Connect Hub and seeing not just your existing conversations, but suggestions. You and 3 teammates haven't chatted with Marcus from architecture in 2 weeks. Start a conversation about the Reynolds project. Or 5 people from your department are discussing lunch plans. Would you like to make it an open invitation? The Anti-FOMO app, Tom murmured. Instead of showing people what they're missing, show them who they might be excluding. Exactly. The room fell silent as Tom processed this. Outside, rain began to streak the windows, turning the Seattle skyline into an impressionist painting. Why should I trust you? Tom finally asked. You're a back-end architect from Nexus. No consumer product experience. No startup track record. You're asking me to hand over my life's work based on philosophy and mock-ups. Before Marcus could respond, Diana spoke up. Because he's putting in $42 million of his own money. Because Cascade Ventures is backing this with another $30 million. Because I'm leaving my consultancy to run this full-time, and because, She paused, glancing at Marcus, because sometimes the best innovations come from people who've personally felt the pain they're trying to solve. Tom looked between them. This is about more than market opportunity for you, isn't it? Marcus met his gaze steadily. 3 weeks ago, I discovered my entire team had a group chat I wasn't part of. Had been running it for months, maybe years. Inside jokes, after-work plans, even technical discussions, all happening in a parallel, social universe I couldn't access. He pulled out his phone, showing his sparse WhatsApp screen. This is what digital exclusion looks like. Empty screens while everyone around you is connected. I'm not the only one experiencing this. We're just the only ones trying to fix it. Tom was quiet for a long moment. Then he laughed on mockingly, but with recognition. You know why I really started Connect Hub? My wife is Indonesian. When we lived in Jakarta, she had this massive WhatsApp group with her extended family. Hundreds of messages a day. When we moved to Singapore for my job, she gradually went quiet in the chat. Different time zone. Different context. Within 6 months, she'd basically been forgotten. Major family decisions, celebrations, even emergencies she'd find out days later, if at all. He stood and walked to the window. I built Connect Hub to solve that problem. Better time zone awareness, automatic translation, culture bridging features. But I got seduced by user numbers and growth metrics. Forgot why I started. Help us remember, Marcus said. Stay on as Chief Product Officer. Keep your equity, plus a performance bonus tied to successful pivot metrics. And the team. I have 12 engineers who believed in this vision. We keep everyone who wants to stay, Diana assured him. In fact, we're planning to hire aggressively. Seattle office for business development, Singapore for engineering. Best of both worlds. Tom turned back to them. Show me the term sheet. The next 3 hours were a blur of negotiations, legal clarifications, and technical discussions. Marcus found himself in his element, diving deep into Connect Hub's architecture, identifying where his inclusion features could be integrated with minimal disruption to existing users. The sentiment analysis is crucial, he explained, pulling up code repositories. We need to identify not just explicit exclusion, but patterns. When someone consistently initiates conversations but rarely receives responses. When group energy drops after certain members join. When planning discussions happen in ways that systematically leave out certain personality types. That's incredibly complex. Tom's lead engineer, who'd joined via video from Singapore, observed, "You're talking about modeling human social dynamics in real time. I've already built proof of concept algorithms," Marcus said, sharing his screen. 3 weeks of nights and weekends, fueled by frustration and too much coffee. It's rough, but the core logic is sound. Diana's phone buzzed. She glanced at it and smiled. Emergence Capital just confirmed. They're in for $20 million, contingent on successful close with ConnectHub. The energy in the room shifted. This was really happening. By 2 p.m., they had a signed letter of intent. Tom would return to Singapore to prepare his team for the transition. Due diligence would take another 3 weeks, but barring any surprises, ConnectHub would soon have new ownership and a radically different mission. One condition, Tom said as they prepared to leave. The pivot needs a new name. ConnectHub was my baby, but it represents the old vision. Your vision needs its own identity. Marcus nodded. He'd been thinking about this for days. Bridges. The platform is called Bridges because it connects people. Tom asked. Because bridges are public infrastructure, Marcus explained. They're not private roads or exclusive tunnels. They're designed to help everyone cross divides. That's what we're building: social infrastructure that serves everyone, not just the chosen few. After Tom left for the airport, Marcus and Diana retreated to a quieter coffee shop in Pike Place Market. The tourist crowds were thin on this rainy December afternoon, giving them space to process what had just happened. You realize we just committed to spending $92 million on a platform with declining user engagement, Diana said, wrapping her hands around her latte. Scared? Marcus asked, terrified. But also, ... She paused, searching for words. When I was at Microsoft, I led teams of hundreds, shipped products to millions. But I never felt like I was solving a real problem. This feels different. Why, did you leave Microsoft? Marcus asked. It was a question he'd been curious about since Richard first mentioned her name. Diana stared into her coffee. Classic story. Only woman on the senior leadership team. Constantly talked over in meetings, watched my ideas get repeated by male colleagues and suddenly become brilliant. But the final straw was finding out about the Saturday golf outings where the real decisions were made. 2 years of wondering why I was always playing catch-up on Monday mornings. The analog group chat, Marcus said softly. Exactly. Different medium, same exclusion. She looked up at him. That's why I said yes to this. Not for the equity or the challenge. Because I'm tired of building tools that make existing problems worse instead of better. They spent the next hour sketching out hiring plans, development, timelines, and go-to-market strategies. Diana's experience with large-scale product launches complemented Marcus's technical vision perfectly. We need a head of community, Diana said. Someone who understands online social dynamics from a psychological perspective, not just a technical one. I may know someone, Marcus said, thinking of Dr. Angela Foster, a digital anthropologist who'd consulted for Nexus on user behavior patterns. She literally wrote the book on digital tribalism. As they prepared to leave, Diana asked, "Have you told your team at Nexus yet about leaving?" Marcus shook his head. I gave 2 weeks' notice to Sarah in HR, but asked her to keep it quiet until Monday. I want to finish the handoff documentation first. And the famous group chat. Do they know their exclusion sparked all this? No, and they don't need to. This isn't about revenge or proving a point to them. It's bigger than that now. They parted ways at the market entrance. Diana headed to her car to start reaching out to potential hires. Marcus decided to walk, despite the rain, needing time to process the magnitude of what they'd set in motion. His phone buzzed. A WhatsApp message, surprisingly, from Jake Morrison. Hey, heads up, we're doing a farewell happy hour for Brad on Friday, you should come. Marcus stared at the message. An actual invitation. Finally, he wondered if Sarah had let something slip about his resignation, if this was a preemptive gesture to avoid awkwardness, or maybe they'd simply remembered he existed for once. He typed and deleted several responses before settling on. Thanks for letting me know. I'll try to make it. But even as he sent it, Marcus knew he wouldn't go. That chapter of his life was closing. He had bigger bridges to build. The rain intensified as he walked through the Seattle streets. Past the tech workers hurrying between buildings, past the coffee shops where startup dreams were pitched and crushed daily. Each person he passed was likely managing dozens of digital relationships, juggling multiple group chats. navigating complex social hierarchies that existed primarily on 5-inch screens. Soon, if everything went according to plan, they'd have a better option, a platform that didn't just connect people, but actively worked to ensure no one was left behind. Users can set their social preferences, opt out of inclusion prompts, control their visibility. We're not forcing extroversion, we're preventing unintentional exclusion. There's a crucial difference. Another hand shot up. Marcus, what would you say to your former colleagues at Nexus? The ones with the group chat that started all this? Marcus paused. He'd known this question would come. I'd thank them. Their exclusion gave me the push I needed to stop optimizing other people's systems and start building my own. I hope they'll try Bridges. Not because they need to include me, that ship has sailed, but because they might be excluding others without realizing it. As the event concluded, attendees crowded the demo stations set up around the auditorium. Marcus watched as people explored Bridges firsthand, their expressions shifting from skepticism to interest to excitement. Angela Foster, their head of digital well-being, appeared at his elbow. The sentiment analysis is already picking up fascinating patterns from the demo users. People are actually reading the inclusion prompts, pausing before sending exclusive messages. It's working, Marcus. Early days, Marcus cautioned, but he couldn't suppress his smile. His phone buzzed. A notification from Bridges Aid passed, 10,000 downloads in the first hour. The infrastructure Tom's team had built was handling the load flawlessly. Marcus, Diana called out, TechCrunch wants an exclusive follow-up, and The Verge is asking about our Series B plans. Series B they'd barely launched, and people were already thinking about their next funding round. But Marcus understood Bridges wasn't just another app. It was a new paradigm for digital communication. As the crowd began to thin, Marcus noticed a familiar face near the exit, Sarah Martinez, his former HR manager from Nexus. She approached hesitantly. Marcus, I wanted to apologize. I knew about the group chat. I should have said something, done something. It wasn't right. Marcus felt the old hurt surface briefly, then fade. It's okay, Sarah, really. Without that experience, none of this would exist. She held up her phone. I've already downloaded Bridges. We're piloting it in my new company. What you've built, it's important, necessary. After she left, Marcus stood alone for a moment in the emptying auditorium. 6 months ago, he'd been a lonely engineer with a wild idea and a lot of pain. Now he was the CTO of a platform that might actually change how people connected online. His phone showed 47 messages in various Bridges groups, his team celebrating. Beta users sharing feedback, investors congratulating. For the first time in his life, Marcus's message screen was full. But more importantly, somewhere out there, thousands of others were experiencing the same thing. People who'd been left out, overlooked, forgotten, now being gently, intelligently, included. The original group chat at Nexus still existed, he was sure. His former colleagues still had their exclusive conversations, their inside jokes, their private plans, but it no longer mattered. Marcus hadn't found a way into their circle, he'd built something infinitely better. As he left the convention center, Seattle's June sunshine breaking through the clouds, Marcus's phone showed one more notification. From the Bridges app itself. You've helped connect 10,000 people today. Take a moment to celebrate this achievement. He smiled, thinking of all the connections yet to be made, all the walls yet to fall, all the bridges yet to be built. The boy, who'd been left out of the group chat, had become the man who made sure others never would be. But this wasn't an ending, it was a beginning. Bridges was live, growing, evolving. And somewhere in Singapore, Jakarta, Seattle, and beyond, people were opening a messaging app that didn't just let them talk, but helped them truly connect. Marcus Chen had been excluded from the group chat. In response, he'd built something that made exclusion itself a relic of the past. And as he walked through the Seattle streets, his phone buzzing with messages from people he'd never have to feel excluded from again, he knew with certainty, this was just the beginning of the bridge they were building together. The revolution in digital connection had begun. One inclusion at a time. 2 years after launch, Marcus Chen stood in the same Seattle conference room where he'd first pitched Bridges to investors. But this time, the atmosphere was different. Gone was the hopeful energy of a startup on the rise. Instead, tension filled the air as board members, investors, and his executive team gathered for an emergency meeting. We need to address the elephant in the room, David Kirkpatrick, Cascade Ventures senior partner, said without preamble. Meta is launching WhatsApp communities next month. Their feature set is suspiciously similar to our core inclusion mechanics. Marcus felt his jaw tighten. They'd known this day would come when the tech giants would notice their success and move to crush or copy them. With 8.5 million active users and partnerships with over 400 organizations, Bridges had become too successful to ignore. How similar? Diana asked, though her expression suggested she already knew the answer. David slid a tablet across the conference table. The leaked screenshots showed WhatsApp's new interface inclusion prompts. Participation tracking, gentle nudges to include quiet members. It was Bridges, painted in WhatsApp's green. They've even stolen our language, Angela Foster observed, reading the marketing copy. Building bridges in digital communities. They're not even trying to hide it. The room erupted in overlapping conversations, legal strategies, technical countermeasures, PR responses. Marcus raised his hand for silence. We always knew this was a possibility, he said calmly. The question is, what do we do about it? We can't outmuscle Meta. Tom Liu said via video link from Singapore. They have infinite resources. If they want to kill us, they can. Maybe, Marcus said, pulling up his laptop. Or maybe this is exactly what we wanted. The room fell silent. Diana leaned forward. Explain. From day one, our mission wasn't to dominate the messaging market, Marcus continued. It was to change how people connect digitally. If WhatsApp implements our features, even poorly, that's 2 billion people who'll experience inclusion-first design. Isn't that a win? A win that bankrupts us, David countered. Our enterprise clients pay for these features. If WhatsApp offers them free, they won't implement them correctly, Sarah Kim interrupted. I've studied those screenshots. They're copying surface features without understanding the underlying psychology. It's like putting a spoiler on a car and calling it a race vehicle. Marcus nodded. Sarah's right, but we need to move fast. I propose we do something radical. He paused, making eye contact with each board member. We open source our core inclusion algorithms. The room exploded again. David actually stood up. You want to give away our competitive advantage? I want to ensure our mission succeeds, regardless of what happens to our company, Marcus replied. But hear me out. We open source the basic algorithms, but keep our advanced features proprietary. We become the premium option for organizations that actually care about inclusion, not just those looking for checkbox features. Diana was already nodding. It positions us as the thought leaders. The originals. Everyone else, including WhatsApp, becomes a pale imitation. Plus, Tom added from the screen, it makes it harder for them to patent around us. Prior art in the public domain. The debate raged for another hour. Financial projections were adjusted, strategies reconsidered. But eventually, consensus emerged. Bridges would take the bold step of open sourcing their core technology while doubling down on premium features and enterprise partnerships. As the meeting concluded, Marcus's phone buzzed. A message on Bridges from an unknown number. Mr. Chen, this is Mark Zuckerberg. I'd like to discuss a potential acquisition. Are you available for a call? Marcus stared at the message, then showed it to Diana. Her eyes widened. The nuclear option, she murmured. They can't beat us, so they want to buy us. That evening, Marcus sat in his new apartment, a penthouse in Belltown with views of Elliott Bay. Success had brought material rewards. But as he waited for the call from Meta CEO, he felt the same anxiety he'd experienced years ago when checking empty message screens. The call came at exactly 7 p.m. Marcus, thanks for taking my call. Zuckerberg's voice was carefully neutral. I've been following Bridges' growth. Impressive work. Thank you, Marcus replied, equally neutral. I'll cut to the chase. Meta wants to acquire Bridges. Full integration into our family of apps. You'd lead our new social inclusion division. Marcus's phone buzzed again. Tom Liu, from the airport, just told my team. They're excited about the new direction. One of my engineers actually cried. Turns out his kid has been dealing with cyberbullying through exclusion. He said building bridges feels like building hope. Building hope. Marcus liked that. It was certainly more ambitious than building a messaging app. As he finally reached his apartment building, soaked despite his rain jacket, Marcus felt the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. $92 million. Hundreds of thousands of users. A team looking to him for vision and leadership. But underlying the pressure was something else, purpose. For the first time in his career, He was building something that mattered beyond metrics and performance benchmarks. He was building a solution to a problem he understood in his bones. The group chat that had excluded him was still active. He was sure his former teammates were probably making weekend plans, sharing technical articles, building their closed community. But Marcus was no longer on the outside looking in. He was building a new paradigm entirely. Bridges, where everyone belonged. Or the platform would gently, intelligently, persistently ask why not. The acquisition would close in 3 weeks. Then the real work would begin. End of chapter 310. Novamente go que editar chapter 4. De long 6 months later, Marcus stood before a packed auditorium at the Seattle Convention Center. The June morning light filtered through the glass ceiling, illuminating an audience of tech journalists, industry analysts, potential investors, and most importantly representatives from organizations that had already committed to piloting bridges with their communities. 18 months ago, Marcus began. His voice steady, despite the magnitude of the moment. I discovered I'd been excluded from my workplace group chat. Not just one conversation, an entire parallel social world my colleagues had built without me. That night, I made a decision. Instead of finding a way into their exclusive circle, I would build something that made exclusion itself obsolete. On the massive screen behind him, the Bridges logo appeared to stylized bridge spans meeting in the middle, forming a connection. Diana Walsh watched from the wings, allowing herself a small smile. The Marcus she'd met 6 months ago would have been terrified at the prospect of public speaking, but months of pitching to investors, recruiting talent, and leading a growing team had transformed him. The brilliant back-end engineer was still there, but now he was also a leader with a mission. Today, Marcus continued, we're not just launching another messaging app. We're launching a movement. A commitment to inclusive communication. A platform that doesn't just allow connection, it actively fosters it. He clicked to the next slide, showing the Bridges interface. Clean, intuitive, but with subtle differences from every other messaging platform. Let me show you what makes Bridges different. Sarah, would you mind joining me on stage? Sarah Kim, their head of community experience and a former digital wellness researcher, walked onto the stage carrying a tablet. Over the past 4 months, she'd become Marcus's secret weapon, translating his technical vision into human-centered features. Sarah's going to demonstrate a typical day on Bridges, Marcus explained. Starting with something we call connection insights. Sarah's tablet screen appeared on the main display. At the top of her message list was a gentle notification. You haven't connected with David from marketing in 12 days? You used to chat weekly about podcast recommendations. The platform learns your communication patterns, Sarah explained, tapping the notification. Not to judge your pressure, but to help maintain relationships that might otherwise fade due to busy schedules or oversight. She opened a group chat labeled Product Team Daily Stand-Up. Unlike traditional group chats, there was a small indicator showing participation, balanza, visual representation of who was contributing to conversations and who might be getting overlooked. Watch what happens when I start typing a message, Sarah said. As she began writing about a new feature deployment, a subtle prompt appeared. Consider it mentioning Alex. They worked on this feature but haven't contributed to the discussion yet, the audience murmured with interest. Marcus took back the microphone. We're not forcing inclusion. We're making it frictionless. Every prompt can be dismissed, every suggestion ignored, but our beta testing shows that 73% of users act on inclusion prompts at least once per day. That's thousands of connections that wouldn't have happened otherwise. He clicked to the next slide, showing testimonials from their beta partners. A diversity officer from a Fortune 500 company appeared on video. Since implementing Bridges for our remote teams, we've seen a 40% increase in cross-departmental collaboration and a 58% decrease in reports of feeling isolated at work. It's not just a communication tool, it's reshaping our culture. Marcus felt a surge of pride. The late nights, the pivots, the moments of doubt, all validated by real impact on real people. But we're not just for corporations, he continued. Let me introduce you to one of our most passionate beta users. Jake, would you come up? A teenager in a wheelchair navigated onto the stage. Jake Patterson was 17, a high school senior, who'd become an unexpected advocate for Bridges after his school adopted it for their peer support program. Before Bridges, Jake said, his voice clear and confident, group projects were my nightmare. Not because I couldn't contribute, but because planning sessions would happen in group chats I'd somehow never get added to. I'd show up to class and Find out everyone else had already divided up the work. He pulled out his phone, showing his Bridges interface. Now, when someone creates a project group, Bridges automatically suggests adding all team members. If someone's left out, it asks, why? My teachers get analytics showing participation patterns. It's changed everything. The audience applauded as Jake returned to his seat. Marcus felt a lump in his throat. This was why they'd built Bridges, not for the valuation or the user numbers, but for the Jakes of the world who'd been systematically overlooked by systems designed without them in mind. We're launching with 3 tiers, Diana announced, taking the stage for the business portion of the presentation. Bridges community for educational and non-profit organizations completely free, forever. Bridges professional for businesses, with advanced analytics and integration capabilities. And Bridges Enterprise for large-scale deployments with custom feature development. She outlined their go-to-market strategy, their partnerships with mental health organizations, their commitment to privacy and ethical AI use. The business model was solid. They'd learned from ConnectHub's mistakes, focusing on sustainable growth over explosive user acquisition. We already have commitments from 43 organizations representing over 200,000 potential users, Diana continued, including 3 school districts, 7 tech companies, and a coalition of mental health support groups. Marcus returned to the stage for the technical demonstration. He showed how Bridges integrated with existing platforms during transition periods, how their AI identified exclusion patterns without invading privacy, how users could customize their inclusion preferences. We're not trying to eliminate private conversations, he emphasized. Privacy is crucial. But we're making sure that privacy doesn't become a tool for systematic exclusion. Every feature has been designed with this balance in mind. As the presentation wound down, Marcus felt his phone vibrate. He glanced at it quickly, a message from Tom Liu in Singapore, watching the stream with the team. We're all crying. You did it? Marcus, you actually did it. Before we open for questions, Marcus said, I want to address something directly. Yes, Bridges was born from personal pain. From nights staring at empty message screens while knowing conversations were happening without me. But this isn't about revenge or forcing people to include everyone in everything. It's about building technology that reflects our better angels, that makes kindness easier than cruelty, that recognizes connection as a fundamental human need. The Q&A session was intense. Journalists asked about privacy concerns, monetization, strategies, competition with established platforms. Marcus and Diana fielded each question with the confidence of founders who'd thought through every angle. What about the people who don't want to be included? One reporter asked. Introverts, who prefer smaller social circles? Sarah took this one. Bridges is completely customizable. Diana would get a seat on our product board. Your team would remain intact, and our mission would become Meta's mission. Imagine implementing your vision across billions of users overnight. Marcus was quiet for a moment. It was everything. He'd claimed to want maximum impact, resources to fully realize their vision, but something felt wrong. What's your number? He finally asked. $2 billion. Marcus nearly dropped the phone. $2 billion. His stake would be worth over $400 million. The team would be set for life. They could fund 100 new ventures. I need to discuss with my board, Marcus managed. Of course, but Marcus, this offer won't stay open long. We're launching communities with or without you. This is your chance to ensure it's done right. After the call ended, Marcus immediately convened a virtual emergency meeting with Diana and key investors. The number stunned everyone. It's 20 times our last valuation, David said, his earlier antagonism replaced by AOE. We'd be idiots to refuse, would we? Marcus asked. Or would we be selling out everything we've built? You'd have resources to impact billions, Priya Patel pointed out. Isn't that what you wanted? Marcus thought about the group chat that had started everything. About Jake Patterson, the wheelchair-bound student who'd become their biggest advocate. About the thousands of messages from users describing how Bridges had changed their social dynamics. I need to think, he said. Give me 48 hours. Those 2 days were the longest of Marcus's life. He walked Seattle's streets, haunted by the decision. He called his mother, who listened patiently before saying, You've never been motivated by money, mijo. Don't start now. He met with Jake Patterson, now a college freshman studying computer science. You inspired me to go into tech, Jake said over coffee. Not because of the money or prestige, but because you showed me technology could actually make the world more inclusive. Whatever you decide, don't lose that. On the second evening, Marcus found himself at Pike Place Market, watching the fish throwers perform for tourists. His phone buzzed constantly, board members, investors, employees, all wanting to know his decision. But it was a different message that caught his attention. From an unknown number on regular SMS. "Hey Marcus, it's Brad Kowalski from Nexus. Heard about the Meta offer. Just wanted to say we were assholes for excluding you from that group chat. But what you built from that pain, it's changed how I think about online communities. My daughter's autism support group uses Bridges. It's helped her find her people. Whatever you decide, thanks for that." Marcus read the message 3 times. Then he opened Bridges and sent a message to his executive team: "Emergency all hands tomorrow. I've made my decision." The next morning, the Bridges office, now occupying 2 floors in a South Lake Union high-rise, buzzed with nervous energy. Marcus stood before his 127 employees, their faces a mix of excitement and anxiety. "2 years ago, I was left out of a group chat," he began. "That exclusion led to this moment. To all of you, to a platform that's helped millions connect more inclusively. Yesterday, Meta offered to buy us for $2 billion. Gasps echoed through the room. Marcus waited for quiet. "I've decided to decline their offer." The gasps turned to stunned silence, then scattered applause that built to a roar. Marcus held up his hand. "This isn't about money. It's about mission. Meta doesn't want Bridges. They want to neutralize a threat. They'll take our features, water them down, and use them to maintain their dominance. That's not why we built this." He clicked to a presentation slide. "Instead, we're doing something else. As of today, we're establishing the Bridges Foundation, a nonprofit arm that will ensure our core inclusion technology remains available to everyone. Forever. We're also launching Bridges Protocol, an open standard that any messaging platform can implement." Diana took the stage. "We'll remain a for-profit company, focusing on premium features and enterprise solutions, but our core mission, making digital communication more inclusive that belongs to the world." The announcement sent shockwaves through the tech industry. Meta stock dipped 2% on fears of a philosophical competitor they couldn't simply buy. Other messaging platforms began reaching out about implementing Bridges Protocol. That evening, as the team celebrated at a Capitol Hill brewery, Marcus found himself on the roof deck, looking out at the Seattle skyline. Diana joined him. "Any regrets?" she asked. "You just walked away from $400 million. Marcus thought about it. "Remember what you said when we first met? That you were tired of building tools that made existing problems worse. Today, we ensured our tool will keep making things better, regardless of who owns it." His phone buzzed. A Bridges message from Tom in Singapore. "The team here is crying again, but happy tears this time. You chose mission over money. That's why we believe in this." Over the following weeks, the impact of their decision became clear. Universities began adopting Bridges Protocol for their internal systems. Mental health apps integrated inclusion features. Even some competitors quietly implemented aspects of their open-sourced algorithms. WhatsApp launched communities as planned, but the tech press savaged it as a soulless copy of Bridges' innovations. Without the underlying philosophy and careful implementation, the features felt forced and invasive. Users complained about notification overload and ham-fisted inclusion prompts. Meanwhile, Bridges grew stronger. Enterprise clients, impressed by their principled stand against acquisition, doubled down on partnerships. New investors emerged, drawn by the company's clear values. The team expanded, attracting top talent who wanted to work for a mission, not just a paycheck. 6 months after rejecting Meta's offer, Marcus stood before another packed auditorium. But this time, it wasn't for a product launch. It was for the first Inclusive Technology Summit, hosted by the Bridges Foundation. "Technology isn't neutral," he told the audience of developers, designers, and digital wellness advocates. "Every feature we build either connects or divides. Every algorithm either includes or excludes. We're here to ensure it does more of the former." The summit featured panels on ethical AI, workshops on inclusive design, and announcements from major platforms adopting Bridges Protocol. Jake Patterson gave a keynote about accessibility in social technology. Even representatives from Meta attended, taking notes in the back. As the summit concluded, Marcus found himself back in the same spot where he'd made his decision months earlier, the Pike Place Market, watching the controlled chaos of flying fish and tourist crowds. His phone showed dozens of active bridges, conversations, his team, summit attendees, family, friends. The empty screen that had started this journey was now a distant memory, but more importantly, somewhere in the world. Someone who might have been excluded from a group chat was being gently included. A quiet team member was being prompted to share their thoughts. A new student was being connected with classmates. The ripples of that original exclusion had become waves of inclusion, spreading far beyond what Marcus had ever imagined. Brad Kowalski's daughter sent him a message on Bridges. "Mr. Chen, thank you for helping me find my people. Your app made me realize I wasn't broken, I just needed better bridges." Marcus smiled, typing back, "You were never broken. The system was. We just fixed it together." As he walked back toward the Bridges office, Seattle's skyline glowing in the setting sun, Marcus's phone buzzed with a notification from the app itself. "You've helped facilitate 100 million inclusive connections. But remember, each one represents a real person who feels a little less alone." The boy excluded from the group chat had not only found his way in, he'd rebuilt the entire structure to ensure no one else would be left out. And in choosing mission over money, he'd guaranteed that work would continue long after any acquisition could have killed it. The revolution in digital connection wasn't just surviving, it was thriving, one genuine human connection at a time.